Hi, everybody. Welcome to 30-Minute Mentor, where I will be chatting about cultivating your creative voice with writer, director, producer, Jason Reitman. My name's Emily Best. I'm the founder and CEO of Seed&Spark. I also want to introduce, no, he's over here, today's incredible ASL language interpreter from the Sign Language Company. This is Gabe Gomez, and we thank him and them for helping us make these events more accessible. And before we kick things off, I want to acknowledge that most of us joining today are coming from occupied territory. I'm joining you from the occupied territory of the Muskogee here in Lilburn, Georgia. The Muskogee have been around for thousands of years and have had very sophisticated governments, which the American government has at many turns tried to take away their governing sovereignty. And they have always resisted that. And to this day, they are able to maintain and grow their own sovereignty. One of the things that we think is really important about acknowledging First Nations people is also acknowledging their resistance, their acts of resistance, especially where they have succeeded, as well as where they have continued to be occupied. There's a really rich history. It's available to you with a quick Google, and I really recommend learning what you can about the territory that you occupy. If you're not familiar with Seed&Spark and you're here to see Jason Reitman, I get it, that's great. We are a platform built to support creators by providing tools for wherever you are in your creative journey, from crowdfunding to education to impact distribution. Our crowdfunding platform has the highest campaign success rate in the world. That's an 88% success rate. We charge no platform fees, and we'll talk about this in a minute. We have something called a patron circle, where industry leaders are distributing thousands of dollars to campaigns, well, a total of more than $100,000 to campaigns all across the platform. And all you have to do to qualify is crowdfund on Seed&Spark. We have a special sponsor today, the Tennessee Entertainment Commission. And their vision is to increase high-quality job opportunities for Tennessee's creative and technology class through the promotion and implementation of programmatic initiatives that reinforce the state as a relevant market for the production and development of multimedia entertainment properties. And even though I'm in Georgia and they're in Tennessee, I say, the Southeast is a rad place to make movies, come here. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce writer, director, producer, creator extraordinaire, and incredibly kind and generous human, Jason Reitman. Jason made his feature debut with the 2006 Sundance hit, Thank You for Smoking, and has notably earned Academy Award nominations for pretty much everything he touches, but for directing Juno and Up in the Air. And then he also produced Whiplash, Jean-Marc Vallee's Demolition, Jennifer's Body, and he recently co-wrote, no big deal, Ghostbusters Afterlife. So without further ado, Jason, come to the stage.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you for that lovely introduction.
Thank you, Julie, for writing it for me, because I was at Tribeca walking 8 miles a day and trying to see movies. Julie is the person who's behind the scenes here doing amazing things to get all of this together on screen. Jason, thank you so much. The most important thing to me right now is to talk about what a generous artist you are. So everybody who's ever worked with you, certainly anybody I know who's ever worked with you, says you're an incredibly generous and collaborative human. But you also recently joined our Patrons program. And can you talk to us about what just happened today?
Well, I originally heard from you and from Mark Duplass, and you both reached out. And when you talk about generous filmmakers, who you really should be talking about is Mark, not me, because he's someone who's just constantly giving back. I think he's way more interested in other people's careers than his own. But he reached out, and you reached out and told me about Spark and Seed, and I really immediately admired what you're doing and what you're supporting, and the voice you were giving to a lot of storytellers. And I just wanted to be a part of it. And as of today, I am going to be supporting 10 filmmakers in their initiative to make their films through your program.
So the Patrons program connects industry heavyweights like Jason with projects that are crowdfunding on our platform. And their commitment is for $5,000 spread across 5 projects. We sent Jason some projects, And he was like, nope, I'm supporting 10. And two of those include the filmmakers you will meet today. Ezra Lee, making X, and Val Vega of Malau will be receiving $1,000 each from Jason's patron support, which is really, really cool and exciting. We're so grateful to you for the support, because the truth is, like, the mentorship is amazing. And also, where the rubber meets the road, the capacity to just get these things made is really what starts careers. So thank you so much for that.
Honestly, I started going through the films you sent me, and one interested me more than the next. And I loved meeting the filmmakers through the videos that they created. I loved the kind of storytelling they were doing just only in that. I liked their backgrounds. I loved what they had to say. And look, let's just be honest. I'm one of the luckiest people who has ever been born. I was born into an incredible amount of privilege basically on every level. And it feels really good to have an opportunity like this to give back and to meet a filmmaker right at the start of their journey and be a very small part of it.
So awesome. Yeah, you know, you were born into some pretty incredible creative lives and franchises, and also you have managed to not be dominated by that, but to find your own very clear, distinct voice.
I mean, you can say that, although my last credit that you just named was co-writing a Ghostbusters movie. So I'm not sure how far I actually got out of the corral, but I'm incredibly grateful to do this job. And I feel, again, like one of the luckiest people alive, because I get to tell stories for a living.
But anybody who's seen Juno, right? Or Thank You for Smoking. I mean, like, I feel like so many of the movies that you make, you're like, that's a Reitman film. Why do I feel that way? Like, what is it that we know? So talk to me about that. Like, what is the importance of actually developing your unique voice?
Look, it's a really kind thing to say. And I have to admit that I don't think of myself as one of those filmmakers. Certainly when you look at people like, Quentin or PTA or Wes or Scorsese, you start thinking of like, well, their films are immediately identifiable. But then you look at a filmmaker like Richard Linklater, who I really admire as my daughter's favorite filmmaker, and it becomes a little trickier. You kind of know it, but it's harder to point to. I remember when I started making short films in high school and in college, and look, if you saw one of my early short films, you would go, yeah, I get it. You like Quentin Tarantino. Now we all know. And we have this tendency to emulate the people that we admire and the people that we love, no matter what art form. I think if you pick up a guitar, if you pick up a pen to write, the first instinct is to try to sound or look or feel like the people that made you want to do it in the first place. And there's this nagging voice in the back of your head that wants to write it a different way. And we're usually embarrassed of that voice. And the journey to becoming an artist and the journey to finding your voice is, frankly, it's that same thing of, at one point you have to look in the mirror one day and say, I love you, to the person you see there. There's a tendency to look in the mirror and hate yourself, right? And just hate how you look and hate how you were born and feel like you were supposed to look a different way. And at some point you have to look at yourself and go, all right, I love this person. And you have to do the same thing with your voice. We feel humiliated by our own voices. We don't want to sound like ourselves on the page. We don't want to sound like ourselves on screen, because we think we're supposed to sound like somebody else. It's like when you sit down to write a short story and you think you're supposed to sound like Raymond Carver or who the hell knows what. And then one day you go, oh no, this is just how I sound. This is my voice. And it's the moment that you embrace that and you start writing and telling stories through that voice that I think you find yourself as a storyteller.
Sorry, that was like some therapy right there. You have to look at and say,
hey, yours and mine both.
to yourself and your voice. How would you know if you're not writing as yourself?
I mean, honestly, we all know when we've walked away from a situation and we didn't speak our truth. Like you meet it when you know when you meet someone that you're attracted to, and you're flirting with them, and the rest of the night you're going, oh my God, I didn't even sound like myself when I was talking to them. Why wasn't I just myself? we get scared when we put on armor, and our armor looks and sounds and feels like other people, because we're too often, shelled in, and we don't think that we're supposed to tell our stories the way we instinctively want to, whether that's because we don't think the way we sound and look and feel is the norm, or we don't think it's funny enough, or sounds educated enough, or sounds cultured enough. Even the way that we've kind of like started to explore what vocal fry is and what it actually means and where it comes from. Becoming a storyteller is honestly the biggest step of it, is embracing yourself and learning that not only is it okay to tell stories in your own voice, but that is what we're all looking for. That when we turn on Netflix or we go to the movie theater, we're often getting fed 100 times of the same bullshit. And what's thrilling is the moment you watch or hear something and you go, wait a second, I just haven't heard or seen something like this yet. It is the moment you see Moonlight, or it is the moment, I remember reading Whiplash and experiencing Damien's voice for the first time, or seeing his first footage come in, and you go, all right, this is somebody new, and that's the thrill.
One last question before we go to our creators, because the industry is a machine, right? And that machine contains like lots of rounds of notes and lots of producers and lots of authorial voices trying to kind of exert their influence. Like, what advice do you give to a young creator to kind of also, like, what sort of tools do you have to like defend that voice as it becomes, more and more part of a collaborative machine? Collaborative, sometimes oppressive machine.
Look, it's a great question, and the industry has changed within my lifetime so much. Even the difference of how I showed up at Sundance the first time in 1998, which is now a long time ago, and now, and what people are watching, where they're watching, and how they're being created. Look, just the kind of the evolution of television in my time, where television now represents a lot of the great independent voices that I only originally associated with independent film that you'd see at film festivals and at indie theaters. Now you see that on Hulu and Netflix. So look, I'd say that you're often either telling a story that is your own and you are making it independently, or you are working within a group that is making a show or making, a studio film. And you have to find yourself within that system. I mean, look, filmmaking is collaborative. That's the joy of it, is that you get to work with so many people, and anyone who's ever worked on a film or a show knows that thrill of being months deep into a project and to feel this tight-knit group, this family that you see, frankly, more than your close friends and your family, and going through hard days and hard nights and the heartbreak when you finally wrap and you realize, okay, I may not see these people for a long time. But look, if you're in a writer's room and there is a showrunner, then part of your job is to make that showrunner the best version of themselves, in the hope that one day you will be the showrunner yourself and you will have a team of great writers making you the best version of yourself.
It's interesting. I talked to a CEO recently who is in a company that is growing really fast. And he has this really, really powerful executive team now. And he says, now I just talk about ideas a lot, like things that interest me. And eventually what happens is these incredibly smart people come back and pitch me much better versions of those ideas that I started with. So it sort of sounds like there is that kind of like, that is, you start to learn how to kind of be an author of ideas, but also let them fly and know how to recognize when the like best version of that thing has been recognized. I love that. So I want to bring on Ezra Lee, who is currently crowdfunding this beautiful project called X, and also has a previous project on the festival circuit that is also really beautiful and has just been released on YouTube, and everybody should go watch it, but I'll let Ezra talk about that. Ezra, take it away.
Yes. Hi.
Hey, Ezra.
How you doing, Jason?
I'm doing good. You?
Great. I had no idea that you would be contributing, and so that's super exciting. And thank you so much.
Yeah, I'm excited to be a small part of your film.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Cool. So my question comes from my own experience as a queer and mixed Asian filmmaker. But how do you navigate cultivating and sharing your creative voice in an industry that hasn't necessarily valued it before?
I mean, look, I am a white dude from Los Angeles, so I want to be really careful in answering this question because I don't want to be presumptuous enough to know what it's like to not be a now middle-aged white dude in particular, where I think the voice, the voice of Hollywood has been, folks who look like me for about 100 years now. So I, I, I have to admit, feeling a little underqualified to answer that question on how to find your voice within an industry that has not acknowledged your voice enough and hasn't appreciated enough. I want to believe in this sense that there's a democratization that is happening right now by virtue of digital filmmaking, the fact that people are growing up with phones in their pockets that can shoot, that can cut, that there's distribution methods, whether it's YouTube, whether it's TikTok, the fact that, I'm seeing creators and storytellers who are learning to shoot and learning to cut and learning to act right from the get-go. I look at my daughter's generation who has been, TikToking, since they were 10 or 11 years old. And as a result, they have a sense of editing and a sense of timing and a sense of cinematography and humor that is going to lend towards their voice and lend towards their films and is going to build them audiences. So by the time they are into their 20s and they've experienced more life and they really have things that they want to share as storytellers, A, they'll have already learned how to do it, and B, they'll have actually developed, real audiences who want to watch their work. There's a young filmmaker that my daughter has been following for years, who is a short filmmaker that my daughter has tracked through high school into college, who she's like tracking her as a storyteller and filmmaker, who's a completely independent filmmaker, who did not grow up like in LA or New York. So I feel like I'm poorly answering your question, but I also just, I don't want to be presumptuous enough to answer something I don't feel qualified for.
Yeah, totally. Well, thank you.
I mean, honestly, you're the answer. The answer is what you're doing.
Yeah.
The answer is that you are taking your life experience. I look at your short film and what you're making, and look, the subject is really funny. Like the way that you're approaching it is really funny, but you're approaching it through truth. You're taking this thing from your real life where you go to these auditions where they're asking you to be, it's like, can you be this one ambiguous race or this other ambiguous race? And you're finding a way to make it completely digestible through humor so that lots of people will want to watch it. And then simultaneously, you're delivering a really powerful message, which is how do we water down the idea of race or gender identity or sexual identity and turn it into a commodity, which is something that I experienced because I directed commercials for years. And do you know how many times I was, doing a commercial for like a beer or a car, and they were like, well, they kind of could pass for maybe Hispanic and maybe Black and maybe this and maybe that, and that will, it's just like that there's such a truth to that I love that you're approaching that.
Thank you. Yeah.
I think that's kind of the power of this kind of interconnectivity, right? Is Jason is a source of truth on some things, and Ezra, you are the source of truth on some things now.
Yes.
And that's, yeah.
I also did not mean to put you on the spot and roast you.
No, I don't feel roasted. Look, my daughter is half Chinese and half me. And this is a conversation that we're having, often. I remember the first time I asked her, I remember just being out with her and I said, wait a second. It's amazing how long it took me to ask her this question. I said, do you think yourself as white or as a person of color? And she said, well, sometimes I feel white and sometimes a person of color. And then we had this wonderful conversation about it. And even as like a budding young filmmaker herself, I watch her trying to navigate, is she a white filmmaker? Is she a person of color as a filmmaker? Is she just my daughter the way I was my dad's son? And all of that goes into her identity, and that is a huge percentage of her as a storyteller. So I love the question you're asking, and I wish I had better answers for it.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ezra. I want to bring on Val Vega, whose project Malau has also just received a $1,000 patron grant from Jason, and is holding it down for an amazing influx of Puerto Rican filmmakers to Seed&Spark, which we're so excited to see. So Val Vega, take it away.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'm super excited to be here, and thank you for being part of my film. I'm very excited.
Val, I cannot wait to see your film. I particularly loved the whatever you wanted, the sales reel, the film that you created that was on your Seed&Spark page, and the way you told your family story and the way that it inspired your desire to tell the story of growing in Puerto Rico, immigration to the U.S., and also what you're going to explore as far as the sugarcane process and what it does culturally. I found it all fascinating. Immediately knew I wanted to be a part of your film.
Thank you. And that kind of goes tied up with what I want to ask, and it's something that I have been thinking about a lot lately, and it's that a lot of my current work has to do with my family's experiences and my own. And so I wonder, is it important to purposely draw from my own life experiences when telling a story, or is it a shortcoming because it's going to limit me to only what I have experienced?
Look, I think whether you like it or not, it's going to be part of who you are as a filmmaker. I find that becoming a filmmaker is two roads that eventually meet. And there is the development of technique, and there's the development of life experience. You're going to make things. You're going to make things from the moment you pick up a camera, from the moment you start writing, the moment you start telling stories and jokes to your friends. You are to develop all your storytelling techniques. How to shoot, how to add music, how to write dialogue, how to direct actors, how to make things feel real. What can you do through cinema that makes people feel things? And it's a process of trial and error. You go, you shoot your first thing, you try it out, and it doesn't work, and you try better the next time. And as that technique is developing, you're having life experiences. You fall in love, you break up, you get a job, you get fired, you make horrible mistakes, things you regret, you do things that you wish you could do again. And there's a moment where those two things meet, where the buildup of your life experience comes in contact with your developing talent and skill. And it's right at that moment that you are ready to be a filmmaker. The tragedy is when someone has only spent their time thinking about movies but not living life, that they get to the point where they have the technique and the skill, but they have nothing to say because they haven't been alive. They haven't been out there doing things. And what's clear in your film is that you are on the right trajectory of both, that you have been building your talent and your skill, and you have simultaneously been thinking about how you got here. Something that I've thought a lot about myself. My grandparents were Holocaust survivors. When I looked at your story, I thought about my own family. My grandparents had to escape under the floorboards of a boat, and right after World War II, my father, they had to they drugged him with a little bit of vodka so that soldiers wouldn't hear them underneath the floorboards of the boat, so they wouldn't cry. And wow. they got to a bordering country, and they explained that they were Jews and they were refugees, and they had no papers on them, and they pulled my father's pants down and showed that he was circumcised, and that's how they proved that they were Jews, and that's how they got out. So particularly, immigration stories are incredible because they speak to who we are and the evolvement of who we are, and I think it's in particularly why I responded so much to your story.
Thank you. Wow, that was amazing. That was an amazing story.
Your story, the finger story, is insane. I mean, I can't wait to hear more about that. That sounds insane.
Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Thank you.
I'm just really enjoying this, y'all. This is really fun to watch. The universality of the storytelling. Val Vega, thank you so much. There's a few folks in the comments, Val. If you pop over to YouTube or you hang over to the comments, like who are offering like any support you need. So make sure to check those out. And Jason, I have one last question that sort of like bubbled up out of here is like you came from like a legacy of big storytellers. You're actually working inside this big storytelling franchise that's also part of your family. Like, do you deal with imposter syndrome? Do you find it? Do you have things that you do to find your voice very specifically inside those spaces? I feel like understanding that kind of nuance could be really helpful for these creators.
It's a great question, and I feel like an imposter every single day. I guess, look, this is what I'll say from whatever stage of my career that I'm in. I've gotten very lucky. I've had great success. I've also had great failure. I've had movies that have been overappreciated. I have films that have disappeared. I have read lovely things about my work, and I have read things that have made me want to never pick up a camera again. I think you always end up feeling like imposter, and I think that's probably a good thing. We need that fuel for our fire. I think if you felt settled, if you felt comfortable, why would you tell stories? We're trying to figure out our problems. Like, that's why you want to sit down and tell a story. Now, you may not know it at the time. I don't know really why I made a movie until years after, and end up talking to someone who gives me a little bit of therapy and says, you were probably dealing with some mommy issues or whatever. But I think if you feel like an imposter, it's not because you are one. We all feel like that. I think most people walking through the world feel like that. We're trying to find a way to understand our existence, find a way to feel a little bit more comfortable. Let that be your fuel. Let the filmmaking journey be a part of your kind of self-exploration. And if it gives you any comfort, know that this kid from Beverly Hills who grew up in Hollywood with a famous director and who's had some success of his own feels the same thing every time I sit down to work at a screenplay. I'm trying to write this next Ghostbusters movie right now, and I feel it all the time, that I don't deserve to be writing this. I don't deserve to be making this, that the Ghostbusters fans of the world deserve a much better filmmaker than me. I feel it all the time. And sit down, write one bad scene, it'll lead to a better scene, and put one foot in front of the other and just know that we're all in this together.
Thank you for that. That is actually incredibly comforting. Thank you. Thank you for your time today. Thank you for your unbelievable generosity, for your sage advice to these filmmakers, for your support and participation of Seed&Spark's patron program. We are really excited to see your next movies.
Emma, thank you. I want to say thank you. You're doing the great work. You're the one who's creating an opportunity for these filmmakers to actually find financing to tell their stories. I think, one of the saddest things that happens to storytellers is they wake up and they feel like they don't deserve to do it. And by creating the program that you have, you're creating this opportunity for people to get the kind of financing that lets them know when they look at that little dial and they see it turn green, that they have supporters, they have people who want to hear stories from them. And maybe just literally watching that little dial hit green lets them know they should be doing it. So thank you for what you're doing for all the storytellers who need to be making their movies. It's frankly way more important work than the shit that I'm doing.
Doesn't totally exist without the shit that you're doing. So we need each other. So thank you. Thank you so much. That concludes this episode of 30-Minute Mentor. Thank you again, Jason. Thank you to the Tennessee Entertainment Commission for your partnership on this event. Thank you so much to Ezra and Val for the thoughtful and challenging questions. To wonderful Gabe Gomez and the Sign Language Company. Thank you to Julie Haberstick on tech, to Danny Thomas, who's been holding down the chat for Seed&Spark, and to our wonderful audience, all of you, for watching and engaging in this discussion and engaging with each other in the comments. If you enjoyed today's event, you can join us tomorrow for Seed&Spark's most flagship workshop, Crowdfunding to Build Independence. This is where we teach you the tools for creative sustainability by learning how to run a kick-ass crowdfunding campaign. And we're doing that in partnership with Screencraft. So you can RSVP and check out more of our upcoming workshops at seedandspark.com/events. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your week, everyone. Bye-bye.